first time you see him, your brain says one thing. Something's wrong, Threes. You don't know why, Threes. He's just sitting there, still quiet, blank, Threes. But your gut twists, Threes. His eyes don't track, Threes. His mouth never opens, Threes. And even though he looks like a grown man, there's something childlike, Threes. 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 Frozen, Threes. This isn't a horror movie, Threes. It's not character study, Threes. This is a real person, Threes. His name is Elias Wren, Threes. And his story is one of the most disturbing, most quietly horrifying cases of generational collapse ever recorded in America, Threes. In a town called Stillwater Hollow, tucked deep in Appalachia, one bloodline folded in on itself so completely it stopped producing language, Threes. This is the true story of inbreeding in modern America, of a forgotten town and a silent boy who became the face of everything we pretend doesn't exist. Threes. They called him the ghost who breathes, Threes. No voice, Threes. No language, Threes. No expression, Threes. Just a boy, now a man, frozen in silence as the world moved on, without him, Threes. You've heard of royal inbreeding medieval kings who married their cousins' bloodlines that shattered under their own weight, Threes, Dom One. But this isn't history. It's happening right now in a forgotten corner of America where poverty, shame and isolation wrapped around one family like a noose, Threes. His name is Elias Wren, Threes. He doesn't scream, Threes. He doesn't cry, Threes. And yet somehow he became the most haunting face of a town no map wants to remember. Threes. A place where bloodlines didn't grow, they collapsed, Threes. Stillwater Hollow, Threes. And to understand Elias, we first have to understand the town that created him, Threes. 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 When you hear the word inbreeding, you probably picture something ancient, something buried in the dust of history, Threes. Your mind drifts to old Europe, to kings with sunken eyes and deformed jaws, to bloodlines that folded in on themselves behind castle walls. Threes. You think of monarchs marrying cousins for the sake of power, not love, Threes. You think of royal portraits of velvet cloaks and hollow eyes, the tragic decay of dynasties obsessed with keeping their blood pure, Threes. These are the stories we read in textbooks, watch in documentaries, or whisper about in museum halls, Threes. We treat them like relics, strange echoes from a time long gone, Threes. We assume this kind of genetic collapse ended with the fall of empires. Threes. But what if we're wrong? What if one of the most extreme, most disturbing cases of inherited collapse didn't happen centuries ago, but is happening right now in the woods of modern-day America? Not in a castle, but in a crumbling wooden house, Threes. Not a prince, but a silent boy with no words left to say, Threes. His name is Elias Wren, and his story is just beginning, Threes. But what if I told you that one of the most extreme, most heartbreaking cases of inbreeding didn't happen in the 1500s or in some remote European castle, but is happening right now in the woods of Appalachia? Not royalty, Threes. Not nobility, Threes. Just a house, Threes. Just a family, Threes. Just a boy who doesn't speak, Threes. In a place the map barely remembers, there lives a man whose very existence whispers a truth most of us are too afraid to hear. That bloodlines can still collapse not from ambition, but from abandonment. Threes. His name is Elias Wren, and he lives in a house that creaks louder than he ever has, Threes. No doctors, Threes. No school buses, Threes. No roads with painted lines, Threes. Just silence generations deep, Threes. You won't find kings here, only broken porches, rusted trucks, and eyes that never quite look back, Threes. Stillwater Hollow, Threes. A town tucked so far from everything that it built its own gravity and pulled itself inward, Threes. Elias isn't a character, Threes. not part of a legend threes. He is real threes. And once you've seen him, you'll understand why some stories don't die, they just go quiet threes. His name is Elias Wren Threes. He doesn't speak threes. He doesn't write threes. He doesn't smile threes. He barely reacts when spoken to threes. And yet somehow, without ever saying a word, he became the face of something America refuses to look at threes. Not because he wanted to threes, and certainly not because he understood what was happening around him threes, but because when you see him, you feel it threes. The weight threes. The stillness threes. The echo of something deeply wrong threes. Elias lives in silence, but that silence screams if you're willing to hear it. Threes. He isn't famous, but footage of him has circled the internet like ghost stories in modern skin clips of him sitting blank-eyed in a chair pushing a grocery cart without looking up, blinking at nothing threes. And behind it all lies a question we don't dare ask: what happens to a bloodline when time forgets it? And when society lets it rot from within, Elias didn't choose to be a warning threes. But when you see his eyes, you understand he is one threes. Not by design threes, but by quiet, irreversible consequence threes. And the town that raised him. It kept its secrets buried, until Elias became the one secret it couldn't hide threes. Stillwater Hollow doesn't show up on postcards threes. It's not the kind of place you stumble upon. It's the kind of place that lets you in, only if you were born from it. Threes. No malls threes. No streetlights threes. Just rusted fences, collapsing porches, and generations of the same last names etched into mailbox doors threes. It's a town caught between memory and decay, where people don't move in and don't move out threes. And when you finally find the Wren house tucked behind a line of trees, like it's hiding from the present, you don't hear barking dogs or kids playing threes. You hear wind threes, creaking wood threes, and a silence so heavy it feels like something is watching from the inside threes. This is where Elias Wren lives threes. But to understand who he became, you have to understand where time stopped, and where the bloodline began folding in on itself. Threes. Stillwater Hollow. Threes. It sounds made up, like something from a ghost story, a place whispered about but never found threes. But it's real threes, and the name fits too well threes. It's the kind of town where time doesn't move forward, it just thickens like syrup, left too long in the cold threes. There are no coffee shops here, no hospitals, no chain gas stations threes, no signal towers threes, no highways for 30 miles in any direction threes. Just dirt roads that don't lead anywhere fast, rusty mailboxes tilted like broken teeth, and houses that all seem to carry the same last name on their deeds. Threes. The same faces, threes. The same blood, threes. Still water doesn't grow, it loops threes. A place suspended between memory and erosion, where children play in silence and the future never really arrives threes. Outsiders rarely visit threes. Locals rarely leave threes. And that's how the town likes it. Threes, because when you seal off a place from the rest of the world long enough, it starts to become its own kind of world. Threes, one with different rules. Threes, different truths. Threes, and different costs. Threes, you don't find Stillwater Hollow by accident threes. You find it when something already broken inside you recognizes the silence. Threes, 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 and feels strangely at home in it. Threes. People don't move to Stillwater Hollow. Threes. And they don't move away. Threes. There's no new neighbour energy here, no fresh start, no job offer that pulls you in, or college that pulls you out. Threes. The names on the gravestones match the names on the school rosters. Threes. Families bury and baptize in the same backyard. Threes. You don't meet strangers, you marry your cousin's daughter. Threes. That's not a room of threes. It's just what's left when there's nowhere else to go. Threes. In Stillwater tradition isn't something you inherit, it's something that wraps around you until you can't tell where it ends. Threes. And over generations the family tree didn't grow upward, it folded inward. Threes. Line by line. Threes. Name by name. Threes. The Wren family wasn't special. Threes. They were simply surrounded by the same last names and the same front doors. Threes. When shame and poverty build walls high enough, people stop climbing. Threes. They stay. Threes. And over time, staying becomes survival. Threes. Survival becomes silence. Threes. And silence becomes threes. 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 Inheritance. Threes. Outsiders might call it inbreeding. Threes. Locals just call it keeping close. Threes. But when blood doubles back on itself enough times, something happens. Threes. Not all at once, but slowly. Threes. Quietly. Threes. Until one day a child is born who doesn't speak. Threes. 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 And never will. Threes. It was here in a sagging wooden house at the end of an unmarked gravel path that Elias Wren was born. Threes. No hospital. Threes. No birth certificate on record. Threes. Just a cold spring morning and a child who never cried. Threes. He would never speak. Threes. He would never write. Threes. And he would never leave. Threes. His entire life would be lived within the same 3 miles of dirt and memory. Threes. From the start, something about him felt paused. Threes. Like the tape had been playing too long and the image began to blur. Threes. But Elias wasn't a glitch. He was a result. Threes. Not of choice. Threes. But of accumulation. Threes. Decades of decisions made in silence behind walls, far from systems that might have intervened. To understand Elias is not to diagnose him. It's to understand what happens when isolation stops being a condition and becomes a culture. Threes. In Stillwater Hollow, distance isn't measured in miles. It's measured in generations. Threes. The house that raised him was older than memory. Threes. The hands that fed him carried the same blood as those who birthed him. Threes. This wasn't evil. Threes. This wasn't intentional. Threes. But when a place cuts itself off for long enough, it stops growing. Threes. It just circles back. Threes. And Elias was where that circle broke. Threes. What happened in Stillwater Hollow didn't begin with Elias. Threes. His silence was not the origin. It was the echo. Threes. The Wren family had been folding inward for generations, tracing circles, instead of branches, repeating names and repeating blood. Threes. This wasn't folklore. Threes. It wasn't a myth. Threes. It was what happens when distance becomes a prison and bloodlines forget how to stretch. Threes. Marriages blurred into relations. Threes. Uncles became fathers. Threes. First cousins raised children who carried 2 versions of the same gene. Threes. And the world outside it looked away. Threes. Because this wasn't happening in a foreign country or in the 1800s. It was happening right here in rural America, behind closed doors and broken windows. Threes. Stillwater didn't hide its story. It just sat quietly and waited for no one to ask. Threes. But the consequences were coming. Threes. They always do. Threes. And Elias. Threes. 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 Was just the beginning. Threes. Because when a bloodline keeps folding, eventually it doesn't bend. Threes. It breaks. Threes. And what came next would reveal just how deep the collapse had already gone. Threes. In Stillwater Hollow, everyone knew the Wren family, not because they were powerful, not because they were loud, but because they never left. Threes. They were a fixture, a loop, a name that stayed no matter how many generations passed. Threes. There was no scandal, no headlines, just quiet arrangements behind closed doors. Threes. Brothers married sisters. Threes. Nieces married uncles. Threes. One woman gave birth to a child whose father was also her cousin. Threes. And another bore a son whose paternal identity was never spoken. Not because it was a secret, but because it was obvious. Threes. The same names repeated. Threes. The same blood repeated. Threes. What started as survival eventually became routine. Threes. And what was once unthinkable became unremarkable. Threes. This wasn't evil. Threes. It was something far colder, normalized desperation. Threes. No money to leave. Threes. No outsiders to marry. Threes. No system checking in. Threes. The town folded in on itself like paper burned from the edges, shrinking, darkening, tightening. Threes. By the time Elias Wren was born, the damage had already been done. Threes. He wasn't the product of a single mistake. He was the child of a system no one dared interrupt. Threes. And now his silence was the only thing that spoke. Threes. No one in Stillwater Hollow chose this. Threes. No one woke up one morning and decided to marry their cousin or raise a child who would never speak. Threes. But poverty locks doors. Threes. Shame locks mouths. Threes. And geography locks futures. Threes. When you're 30 miles from the nearest, anything survival starts to look like repetition. Threes. The first few generations seem normal or close enough. Threes. Kids learned slowly. Threes. Some didn't speak until age 6. Threes. Others stuttered, rocked in chairs, or wandered off mid-sentence. Threes. But people made excuses. Threes. He's just quiet. Threes. She's just sensitive. Threes. No one asked questions. Threes. Because asking meant admitting something was wrong. Threes. And then the pattern deepened. Threes. Babies were born who never said a word. Threes. Children who stared through you instead of at you. Threes. Teenagers who couldn't bathe or feed themselves. Threes. And by then, it was too late. Threes. The bloodline had doubled back too many times. Threes. What was once a family became a genetic echo chamber. Threes. And Elias Wren, he was the loudest silence of them all. Threes. Not because he screamed, but because he never made a sound. Threes. And still everyone knew exactly what he was trying to say. Threes. In many Appalachian towns, the effects of inbreeding stay hidden, tucked behind back roads, and polite silence whispered about, but rarely faced. Threes. But in Stillwater Hollow, there was no more hiding. Threes. The truth walked on 2 feet. Threes. It breathed. Threes. It blinked. Threes. It stared without blinking back. Threes. What had been manageable a generation ago became unignorable. Threes. And in the middle of that quiet collapse, a child was born who would never speak a single word, but would come to embody the unspeakable. Threes. His name was Elias Wren. Threes. From the day he arrived, he brought with him a silence heavier than sound. Threes. No cry at birth. Threes. No babble. Threes. No eye contact. Threes. Just a stillness that felt inherited. Threes. He didn't grow into the world. Threes. He sat in it like a warning carved into flesh. Threes. His body functioned, but something was missing behind the eyes. Threes. He wasn't violent. Threes. He wasn't broken. Threes. He was distant. Threes. Removed. Threes. He was what happens when a bloodline loops too many times and runs out of places to go. Threes. Elias didn't just carry Stillwater's past, he wore it. Threes. In his silence, in his stare, in his complete inability to escape what had already been decided. Threes. By the time Elias Wren entered the world, Stillwater Hollow had already forgotten what normal looked like. Threes. His birth wasn't announced, threes. It wasn't photographed, threes. It was absorbed like another thread in a fabric that had been unravelling for decades. Threes. He didn't cry, threes. He didn't scream, threes. And no one expected him to threes. In a town where silence had become tradition, Elias was seen not as a tragedy, but as proof that the past had finally rooted itself in flesh. Threes. He wasn't different, threes. He was inevitable, threes. And what came next would not only confirm that, but expose just how deep the rot had reached, threes. Elias Wren was born in the spring of 1979. Threes. No hospital, threes. No documentation, threes. Just a wooden floor, a pale sunrise, and a boy who made no sound, threes. His mother, Mara Wren, carried the family name both by blood and by law, threes. She was a Wren before marriage and after, because there was no one outside the circle to marry, threes. Elias was raised in the same collapsing house where Mara's siblings still lived, adults who never spoke, some who rocked for hours in silence, eyes glassy and unfocused like dolls left out in the rain, threes. This wasn't just one broken child in a normal home, threes. This was an entire bloodline unravelling in slow motion, threes. No therapy, threes. No diagnosis, threes. Just patterns repeated in the dark, threes. Behind each closed door was another version of Elias, unfinished, untethered, untouched by the outside world. Threes. He didn't just inherit silence, threes. He was born into a family that had already forgotten how to listen, threes. And as we move deeper into his life, what we see next won't just disturb. It will destroy what we think we know about what makes someone human, threes. From the very beginning, Elias Wren was different, threes. He didn't cry, threes. He didn't reach, threes. He didn't react, threes. His face was blank, his hands limp, his eyes never quite landing anywhere, threes. And yet against everything the town believed, against everything biology seemed to dictate, he went to school, threes, quietly, threes, without warning, threes. One day he was just on the bus, threes. No one knew how or why, but somehow he stayed, threes. And even more impossible, he graduated, threes. No speeches, threes. No senior photo, threes. Just a cap, threes. A gown, threes. And a boy who had never said a single word walking across a stage like a shadow that had learned to move, threes. How do you explain that a child who didn't write his name, couldn't answer a question, couldn't tie his shoes, standing in front of a crowd that clapped without understanding what they were witnessing, threes? It wasn't hope, threes. It wasn't triumph, threes. It was something stranger, threes. A body completing a ritual without the mind to explain it. Threes. And if Elias could graduate, what did that say about everything we thought we understood about presence, achievement, and the soul itself? Behind the silence, something lived, threes. Maybe not fully, threes. Maybe not in the way we understand consciousness or connection, but something was still there, threes. Elias Wren didn't speak, but he responded, threes. Barely, threes. Soft grunts, threes. Shaky gestures, threes. A nod that might mean yes or nothing at all, threes. In a few rare pieces of footage, he's seen pushing a shopping cart slowly through a grocery aisle. His hands barely gripping the handle, his eyes drifting like they're underwater, threes. In another clip, he sits in a barber chair while clippers buzz around his head, threes. He doesn't flinch, threes. He doesn't smile, threes. He doesn't move, threes. It's as if he exists in a parallel layer of reality close enough to touch, but never fully hear, threes. No tantrums, threes. No struggle, threes. Just stillness, threes. But it's not peace, it's detachment, threes. As though his body was given form, but whatever animates the rest of us never arrived, threes. And yet, There's just enough movement to keep you watching, hoping, doubting threes. Because what you're seeing isn't absence threes. It's something more disturbing. Presence without participation threes. And it forces a question we're not ready to answer. What if survival can outlast the self? There are no medical records for Elias Wren threes. No diagnosis. Threes. No chart threes. No clinical history to explain what he is or what happened to him threes. But the speculation never stopped threes. Severe nonverbal autism threes. Profound intellectual disability threes. Some whispered about fragile X syndrome, a known result of repeated consanguinity, especially in isolated Appalachian communities, 3 says. The symptoms fit limited communication, cognitive delays, muted facial expression, social detachment, 3 says. But there was never a test, 3 says. Never a formal screening, 3 says. Because there were no doctors, 3 says. No funding, 3s. No plan, 3s. Just family, 3s. Just survival passed down like a ritual meals, bathes, silence, 3s. Elias didn't grow up in a system designed to understand him 3s. He grew up in a system that forgot how to try 3s. No therapy, 3s. No speech programs, 3s. No neurological evaluations, 3s. Just decades of guesswork passed from cousin to cousin, like hand-me-down clothes, 3s. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all, not that no one helped, but that no one expected help to come 3s. Because in Stillwater Hollow, the diagnosis never mattered. 3s. What mattered was keeping the circle closed and letting the silence explain everything 3s. And so Elias Wren lives in a world that doesn't know what to call him 3s. He's not a monster 3s. He's not a miracle 3s. He's not a villain or a victim 3s. He's something else, a human being abandoned not by people but by definition 3s. Language doesn't hold him 3s. Psychology can't quite reach him 3s. And morality doesn't know where to stand 3s. Was he failed? Was he simply inherited in a society obsessed with labels? Elias is a void too quiet to categorize 3s, too still to provoke outrage 3s, too real to be myth, too broken to be explained 3s. He is what happens when history keeps repeating until it forgets what it's repeating for 3s. He's not dangerous 3s. He's not angry 3s. He's just 3s. 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 Absent 3s. Present in body missing in blueprint 3s. A life without a narrative 3s. A boy who aged into a man without ever entering the world. The rest of us live in 3s. He isn't the warning 3s. He's the result 3s. The outcome of silence, of shame, of time folding back on itself until all that's left is a name 3s. 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 And a stare that never quite looks back. 3s. Elias Wren is still alive. 3s. Still breathing 3s. Still watching 3s. His story didn't end with a tragedy. It never had a beginning to begin with 3s. And maybe that's what makes it even harder to face 3s. Because when a life unfolds without language, without independence, without change, 3s. 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 What do we call that? Not survival. 3s. Not death. 3s. Just 3s. 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 Continuation 3s. And what we see next is even harder to ignore 3s. Today, Elias Wren is still alive 3s. He doesn't drive 3s. He doesn't speak 3s. He doesn't hold a phone or recognise a touchscreen 3s. He has never posted 3s. Never typed a word 3s. His world exists inside the same decaying home where he was born, surrounded by the same wallpaper, the same broken window frame, the same distant hills 3s. He is cared for by his aging mother Mara and a cousin named Jonah, who barely says much himself 3s. Elias eats when he's fed 3s, sleeps when reminded threes, sits by the window for hours without moving, watching nothing in particular threes. In a world addicted to noise and constant movement, he is a ghost that breathes a still echo of a legacy we never healed. Threes. He doesn't make demands. Threes. He doesn't cry for help. Threes. And yet his existence is louder than any scream. Threes. He's the unanswered question we've all learned to step around. Threes. And as we move forward, as years stack quietly on top of him, one thing becomes painfully clear. Elias never left Stillwater Hollow because Stillwater never truly left him. Threes. In 2021, Elias Wren had a heart attack. Threes. No warning. Threes. No emergency plan. Threes. Just a sudden collapse, and for the first time in his life, modern medicine came looking for him. Threes. Not to cure him. Threes. Not to diagnose the decades of silence written into his body. Threes. Just to restart a heart that didn't know why it stopped at threes. Paramedics arrived like strangers entering a museum sealed for years. Threes. They didn't ask about developmental history. Threes. There was no medical file to consult. Threes. No prescriptions. Threes. Just a man who couldn't speak, staring past them, as if the pain hadn't even registered. Threes. He survived our threes. Barely. Threes. He was stabilised, monitored, discharged. Threes. And then, as quickly as he'd been touched by the 21st century, he was returned home. Threes. No therapy followed. Threes. No case review. Threes. No long-term plan. Threes. Because Elias didn't belong to the system. Threes. He belonged to Stillwater. Threes. And in Stillwater, healing wasn't expected. Threes. Only continuation. Threes. His heart beats now because someone forced it, but no one ever asked if it had anything left to say. Threes. And that silence, that's what lingers longer than the pain. Threes. After a short video of Elias Wren went viral, people responded the only way they knew how, with money. Threes. Donations poured in. Threes. Well-meaning strangers sent support. Threes. A new roof was installed on the collapsing house. Threes. A working refrigerator replaced the broken one. Threes. An old pickup truck was gifted to Mara, who'd never asked for one. Threes. It felt like hope, but only from a distance. Threes. Because for Elias, nothing changed. Threes. No new words. Threes. No new expressions. Threes. No awakening. Threes. The same meal routines. Threes. The same faded chair by the window. Threes. The same echoing silence that no renovation could fix. Threes. Viral attention gave Stillwater Hollow a brief spotlight, but it couldn't rewrite generations of collapsed threes. It couldn't force healing into a body that had never been taught what healing looked like. Threes. And so the world moved on. Threes. The comment sections closed. Threes. The donations stopped. Threes. But Elias remained. Threes. Unmoved. Threes. Unchanged. Threes. Undeniably there. Threes. Because sometimes visibility doesn't lead to transformation. Threes. Sometimes the most viral stories are the ones no algorithm can truly fix. Threes. And in that truth lies the quiet tragedy that even when the world noticed, Elias, threes. 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 He never noticed back. Threes. But there was a moment. Threes. Just one. Threes. It happened on a quiet evening, years after the world had stopped asking questions. Threes. Mara was folding clothes, speaking more to herself than anyone else. And she made a small joke, something simple, something tired, something only a mother would think to say out loud. Threes. She didn't expect an answer. Threes. She didn't even expect a reaction. Threes. But then, Elias smiled. Threes. Not wide. Threes. Not long. Threes. But just enough for Mara to freeze. Threes. She swears it happened. Threes. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. Threes. A breath that paused differently. Threes. A shift in his stillness. Threes. No one else saw it. Threes. There's no recording threes, but she knows threes. And if she's right, even for a second, then everything changes threes. Because it means Elias is still in there threes. Watching threes. Feeling threes. Remembering threes. Trapped behind a wall too thick for words, too old for science to reach threes. That single smile wasn't a recovery threes. It wasn't a miracle threes, but it was proof that the silence might not be empty threes. That deep beneath the weight of Stillwater's history, a flicker of humanity still survives. Threes, quiet threes, but alive threes. Elias Wren never chose to be a symbol. Threes. He never raised his hand, never gave consent, never spoke a single word to shape his story. Threes. But in his silence he has told a truth that few others ever could. Threes. A story of collapse. Threes. Of consequence. Threes. Of what happens when blood forgets where it's been and no one stops to ask where it's going. Threes. Elias didn't need a microphone. Threes. He didn't need language. Threes. Because what he carries in his body, the blank stare, the paused motion, the years of quiet repetition, is louder than any speech. Threes. He is not just the product of inbreeding. Threes. He's the echo of everything we choose not to confront. Threes. Poverty. Threes. Shame. Threes. Abandonment. Threes. The cost of pretending it's not happening here. Threes. Not now. Threes. But it is threes. And if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still watching, then maybe, just maybe, you've heard him threes. Not with your ears. Threes. But with something deeper. Threes. Because Elias Wren never spoke. Threes. But somehow threes. 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 You heard him anyway. Threes. And that's what makes him unforgettable. Are threes. Maybe the most terrifying stories aren't the ones with monsters, but the ones where no one listens until it's too late. Threes. Elias Wren wasn't a warning. Threes. He was the result. Threes. A human life shaped by silence, inherited isolation, and the weight of everything we chose to ignore. Threes. And now you've seen it. Threes. You've heard what was never said. Threes. So the question is, what will you do with it? If this story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Threes. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you felt, what you saw in Elias's eyes. Threes. Save this video if it shook something loose in you. Threes. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe now. Threes. Because silence may be the most dangerous legacy of all. Threes. And the only way to break it. Threes. 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 Is to keep listening. Threes.